Okay, welcome to part 3 of the Beginner City tutorial for Unity. Um, Now I've created a terrain. I've got sort of a level that we can work with. Got some sort of a mountain range in one side that comes down to sort of some grassy area, and then I've got a really nice flat area down here that's just plain sand, and that's where I'm going to build my entire city. So for this tutorial, we're going to look at how to place some roads. The roads are really important because it will kind of serve as the real structure that the whole city is based around, as real cities in real life as well. Okay, so it is really useful to have a nice, perfectly flat area that your city can be made on. That's just going to save a lot of hassle when you are trying to put buildings in, and you've got to, roads, and you have to adjust everything. Of course, it can be done. It's just a lot more time consuming because you will need to place, for example, if I wanted a road going up into the mountains here, I could do that, but I'm going to have to, obviously going to be a lot of adjusting and twisting and whatever to make it happen. Whereas at least if we're all on a flat plane, it makes things a lot easier. Okay, so we'll head into the asset store and to find a road pack, and I have I got one called Low Poly Road Pack, and I quite like that. Okay, pricing free. Okay, so this is the one that I got, Low Poly Road Pack. Now, probably any of these are going to work. I don't actually want to make a low poly city, so low poly means that there's less detail in the models. It's kind of got that cartoony sort of chunky design look. I don't really want my entire city to look like that, but I think that roads are simple enough that I think I can get away with a low poly road pack because roads are essentially flat anyway, so I don't think people will really notice. I'm going to put these kinds of roads in, and then I'm going to put different types of buildings, but I think that no one's really going to care what those roads look like, so I'm going with this one, but you could use any of these packs. So I downloaded it, imported into the road, into my Unity, and here it is. Okay, so now I may have talked about this already, but basically there are in the assets area over here, there are materials, which are like textures, models, and prefabs. Now, once you import the roads, you'll see them show up kind of in models and in prefabs. The difference obviously being that the models are kind of blank. They're just plain, they're going to just be plain gray. They don't have any kind of texture or material applied to them. So we don't want to don't get anything out of models. Find your roads in prefabs, and those are the ones that you're going to use. Okay. Now this pack comes with heaps of different modular options. So there are like ramps if you want to go up and do bridges or overpasses. There's also tunnels and things like that, which is great. The one that I want is going to be just this here, road straight. Very simple looking one. Let's zoom in down here. Okay. So you'll notice that the road has this kind of wall that goes down on one side, and it's also on the other side, although you won't be able to see it unless you're on the other side. There, now it appears. Okay, so that's basically so that your road can kind of clip through the ground, because if you've got uneven terrain, I don't in this particular case, but if you did have uneven terrain, it wouldn't necessarily matter if you've got it like perfectly on top of the land or not. You could just bring it up a little bit, and even if that ground kind of goes up and down, you're still not going to like see underneath the road, basically. So it's kind of like a nice little cap on the end. But in my case, my terrain is completely flat in this area, so I can just drop that down as low as I want it to be. Okay, so there's my first little section of road, and that's looking pretty good. So I'm going to just basically need to copy these heaps and heaps and heaps of times. To get started, this might take a little while, but Command D is a button so you can select it, hit Command D, and then just drag it out, so that'll make a copy, and you can move it over till it lines up perfectly. And now I've got 2 sections of road, so now I can select the 2, Command D, and now I'm building in groups of 4. Okay, so it's going to take a little while to get started, but once you kind of get decent stretches of road made, you can copy those entire stretches. So now I can actually copy by the 4, so it's going to get a lot easier. Now, the first thing you'll probably notice that this over here in the hierarchy, I've now got quite a lot of copies of copies of copies, basically, right? And if I keep making this, eventually I'm going to have thousands, tens of thousands of copies of things, and I won't be able to find anything over here in the hierarchy. So it's going to be pretty important that we get organized so that we don't get confused with all of our roads. Okay, so what I probably suggest, I'm going to go one more here. I'm going to make it 8, Command D. So now I'm up to 16 sections, and that's a fairly nice chunk of road. That could almost probably be like an entire street. Okay, so I'm going to select all of these pieces of the road, and that first one, which is up here. Okay, so I've got them all selected, and I want to basically put them in a group. Okay, actually I've done this in the wrong order. So I'm going to create an empty. Okay, so an empty is not really an object, it's kind of just like a placeholder, and I'm going to rename it to be, let's call it street, just as an example. But eventually, once you name your streets, you might call it Main Street, or you might call it whatever you want to call it. Okay, so now I've got that, and let me select, let me select all those pieces of road, plus that first one, and I'm going to drop them into street. Okay, now I can kind of organize them almost kind of like folders. And so when I now select street, it grabs me all of that. Okay, so now I've got some nice long sections of road that I can use to kind of start to build my grid out. So depending on the way that your city's built, you might even have, so select street, you might even have Command D, kind of like 4 copies of your road, making up a little like grid or something like that. And then I could, it's going to give me street 1, 2, 3, so I could call it first street, second street, third street, or I could call it, Oak Street, Willow Street. I mean, whatever you want to name them, you can do whatever you want. But that kind of is going to keep you a bit organized over here. And then, of course, if you need to move an entire road somewhere else, it's going to be a lot easier than trying to select individual ones. Selecting individual ones is obviously tedious, but also you could pretty quickly see how hard that's going to be. Even for me just to try and select all these little pieces right now, it takes some time, but imagine if I had buildings in between, trees in the way, power lines, cars on my thing. I'm never going to be able to select all these things if I need to, but if I've got them organized over here in the hierarchy, it's a lot easier to do that. So it's just kind of a workflow issue. Okay. Now obviously these need to connect up, so I would need next some curves. So I think here is the single lane curve, so let's drop this in. Oh no, I need a double lane curve, just realized. Road curve. Okay, so pop that in there, and we're going to need to rotate it. So rotation is up, you can turn on the tool up here. The shortcut is, I think, E, W, E, yeah. Now I can, if I've got the rotation tool on, I can grab this to rotate things around, which is nice, but doing it by eye is not necessarily the best idea because you may not get it exactly right. So if you're rotating things, definitely recommend you looking over here in the inspector and seeing what this value tells us, because we know we're going to need to rotate it exactly 90 degrees here, right? because I want it to be in line with my road. And this almost looks like it's right, but obviously if I zoom and look at it from like a different angle, I'm going to see how far off I was. Okay, so you could rotate actually by just typing straight in here, 90, or maybe minus 90. Okay, so that's going to give you a better result, and you're going to get it more accurate. Okay, now let me move it over here, close to my road, down. Okay, and then just get the whole thing matched up perfectly. Cool, looking good. Where is it? Okay, so I don't think that it's going to matter too much if you put it, if you put one section like slightly inside the other section, but I think it will matter if you have gaps. So that would be my kind of advice on that. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, so then I would, okay, that probably is not enough of a space in between, because I'm going to need another one of these to connect. I'm going to rotate this 180. Yep, looks good. Okay, and let's see if that's there. Cool. And move this back out. Oh, no, not the entire thing. Oops, that's my mistake. Select the entire street. There we go. Cool. So now we're starting to kind of make our roads connect and whatever. This is going to take some time, but it's worth doing it properly. And as is it worth organizing here, because the roads alone, just after doing the roads, you're going to have thousands of things. So once you start putting in buildings, all kinds of things, the hierarchy is going to get out of control. So it's a really good idea to organize them into empties. Okay, I'm going to spend some time building my road system, and then I'll check in on the next video.